welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the 28th edition of the Educational Leadership Forum. We truly appreciate you taking the time to be here for today's workshop on AI and social learning with Professor Jason Gulya. Before we begin, let's take a moment to introduce ourselves. So please share your name and where you're from in the chat so we can connect as a community. I am Henreso from Myanmar, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's facilitator, Professor Jason Gulya. Professor Gulya is a professor of English and Applied Media at Berkeley College, where he teaches courses on writing, humanities, and AI-powered communication. Beyond the classroom, he works globally as an AI consultant and strategist, helping colleges and businesses navigate the evolving role of AI in education. He is also the co-author of Artificial Intelligence, Real Literacy, and has been featured in Forbes and Business Insider for his insights. We're excited to have him here today. So, Professor Gulya, over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the invite and the chance to speak. And I actually want to start just by kind of handing power over to you. I'm not going to go right into who I am or anything like that. I'm not going to go right into my PowerPoint slides, but I actually want to use the chat a little bit just to give a sense of how we connect with each other, because this is about social learning. It's about what happens when humans or human and machines, or however you define society, we'll come back to a little bit, what happens when we interact with each other. So I have a couple questions just to ask you. Just pop some ideas in the chat. And feel free as you're doing this to pop in as many as you want. So this is basically a popcorn exercise. So just feel free to just keep the ideas flowing in there. Just keep them popping, keep them as they pop into your mind, just put them in the chat. So the first question is, how are you feeling about AI today? So thinking about AI in whatever form you want, what are your feelings? What are your emotions? Good, bad, someone in the middle. So just take a minute and just pop your ideas in the chat. And I'm seeing overwhelmed, under siege. Yeah, and feel free to like each other's ideas and comments if you want. Helpful, cool. Good, healthily skeptical. I really like that idea. We'll come back to that, how my own way of sort of phrasing it, but I'm sort of the same way. Excited, helpful, really helpful, awesome. I'm learning day by day. Yeah, so this kind of incremental approach. You just take it day by day, little by little, minute by minute. Awesome. Cool. And then, yeah, Sana says, want to know more. So this state of constant curiosity, you find out more, and then you just learn that there's more to find out. And so it's this ongoing cycle. Cool. And someone just wrote, so Akansha said, AI helps me understand the human mind better. So, and that's one of the big benefits of this research, that increasingly the human and the machine are becoming, they're not becoming one, but they're becoming intertwined. And so there are ways to think about machine learning in a way that improves our understanding of the human mind and human learning, and vice versa. And then someone said, a manipulative friend. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that that's a good way to think about it, that there is a lot good about this technology, especially in terms of it just helping with our everyday lives. And then there's also this negative side. I feel like we're being manipulated, and there are a lot of ways in which that's a very, very real threat. And then Oshan says, depends on how you use it. And so that is something that I'm going to come back to as an idea again and again. And especially for anyone who is an educator, anyone who is working with students and trying to figure out how to incorporate AI. And I'll just use that as kind of a blanket term now. I'll come back to it a little bit. But we have generative AI, we have other forms of AI, but anyone who's trying to work that into the classroom, we want to be very, very responsible I teach at the college level, and I have many friends who teach, high school, middle school, elementary school, and are thinking about how to incorporate this technology. And so whenever we're doing that, especially if we're working with children 15 years and below, we want to be very, very responsible with how we use it. And then someone says, incredible. Yeah, so there's a lot that you can get out of it. All right, cool. And feel free to keep the ideas coming. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you another question. This one's going to up it a little bit. And it's going to be a little bit more challenging. And so I'm going to give you a little bit more time to kind of tinker with this one. So we have some ideas, some emotions about AI. And so I'm going to talk about AI and social learning because it's kind of the thing we're discussing. So I want you to guess. I want you to use the chat. How do you think? And you might have from the other section some ideas from them, so you can bring them in if you want. How do you think AI is connected to social learning? I know it's a hard question. So how do you think AI is connected to social learning? So again, find the chat, pop in some ideas. So feel free to use ideas you have from other sessions or something that's been kind of just in your head and you've been thinking about it. So just put some ideas in there. Kind of asking you to guess what I'm going to talk about in some ways. And it doesn't have to be a fully formed idea, just whatever you're thinking of. Cool. It takes a village to raise a child, and AI is part of that village. Yeah. So we're going to come back to what social actually means. Awesome. All right. So my work specifically, and this is Chase, my work specifically deals with critical thinking, specifically music education. So trying to figure out as this technology gets worked into social learning, whatever that is, how can you do it in a way that boosts critical thinking as opposed to just offloads it or replaces it? And we want to, at least for me, be very, very mindful of that dynamic. Awesome. All right, cool. And then Oshan says, AI gets shaped by what people say. So it's learning socially and vice versa. So as this technology gets worked into modern society, it is a reflection of us. And we need to think about that the training, the data sets built into these AI programs, especially generative AI, it's the internet, it's human created, so they mirror us. And so there's a weird way in which we are creating a society that has mirrored versions of ourselves. So it's very sort of trippy, very sort of meta. And then Asana says enhancing collaboration and communication. So it actually does have this potential for allowing us to learn more socially, connect with each other more. And one of the ideas I'm constantly coming back to again and again is whether we can use this technology as a chance to really think about what it means to connect as humans. Right? It's a push. It's a way to really rethink whether we've been connecting as humans for a while or whether that started to go away. And I'm gonna talk about this a lot later too. And then yes, sharing and connecting with each other. Awesome. And then, oh, I love this idea. Uzma says giving a different perspective. Yeah. So, and there are different ways I see that working now. One is a different perspective on what society means. And I think one of the things that we'll have to really embrace going forward is being very open with how we define social, how we define society. So I think there's a lot of pressure on our current definition, which for me, and I will put myself in this group, often means human. Right? And I think social, and I think society, I think human to human. And there's a lot of pressure right now being put on that for good and for bad and for neutral. And so trying to be very open to this. And another perspective, it's just using it to get something, get an idea. So if we are brainstorming something, we are stuck on something. If you interact with AI, one of the things that's really interesting is that you might get something that is devoid of human context. And at first that's sort of limiting, that's sort of frustrating even, but it can actually give you a window into something. It actually can teach you something because it allows you to think, well, what was my human context doing? So I really like that idea. There's a lot built into that. All right, and meta-analysis. Yeah, so the thinking big picture, thinking big data. So thank you so much. And if more comes up, feel free to put them in the chat. I should see them even if I'm sharing my screen, although with Teams, sometimes that happens, sometimes it does not. So we'll see how it goes. And today, I'm not going to lecture the entire time. We're going to try to make it as collaborative as I can. So I have my ideas that I want to throw out there and concepts I want to walk through just to give some context and to give some framing for us. And then periodically, I'm going to pop out of share screen and I'm going to engage with you. I want this to be somewhat interactive. And then probably for the last half hour, 40 minutes, depending on how things go and depending on how our conversation goes along the way, I want to do a little bit of a workshop. I want to think about what sort of chatbots we can create. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about social learning. I'm going to think about AI. And then eventually I'm going to land on role-playing chatbots as a specific example. This is something that I use in my classroom. And if you do some research and some sleuthing around, you'll see that this is one of the big, or I think you'll see that this is one of the big use cases for this technology. Being able to practice role playing in a very kind of contained, limited form and pretty safe feeling form so that we can try again and again and again and again. All right, so awesome. Thank you so much for your answers. You gave me a lot to work with. I'm going to try to work in these ideas as I go along. So I'm going to see how this goes. I'm going to see how the technology treats me. I am going to share my screen. I will just do the entire screen, so hopefully I don't run into anything. I will share my audio because I always forget to do that. All right, so you should be able to see my entire screen now. All right, so, and again, I'm going to try to make this as interactive as I can. So I'll have my slides, but I'm going to pop out from time to time. And so on the screen right now, and I will give this at the very end, if you have your phone handy, you can scan that QR code. And by doing that, you get my contact information. And again, I will put this at the very end of the presentation as well. If you want to continue this conversation, you are more than welcome to treat this not just as a one and done deal, but this is an invitation to continue to reach out to me. This is very much a work in progress. I'm not giving you something that I've entirely made up my mind about. And that's on purpose because one of the best things I think we can do is bring our learning, bring our thought process out into the open. And then if you want to, we can talk about it. So if you are struggling with something, or if you have another idea, or if you disagree with me, with this QR code, you have the ability to email me. You have other ways of contacting me. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on other social media, and I try to be very, very responsive. So if you reach out to me, if you're really struggling with something, let's chat, let's work through it, because I think that the better we are at collaborating and working together and working as a society, so this is very sort of like meta, it's all about social learning. So the more that we collaborate and work with each other, I think the better prepared we are going to be, and moving forward is going to be based off collaboration. So, and I'll give it to you at the end. And in the chat, if you don't have a computer, a phone handy for any reason, or you're maybe attending on your phone so you can't really scan it, I will put the link in the chat too so you have it. All right, so, and what I want to do first is I want to build a framework. I think that one of the best things we can do before we dive into thinking about chatbots and role playing and what that feels like when we're using a machine that's taking on a designed human role, one of the best things we can do is to have a framework going in. So I'm going to give you one that hopefully we can return to. And I'm going to do it in, I don't know if it'll be a unique way, but I'm going to try to get at two dynamics, two ideas that I think really come together as we think about social learning. And again, this is something we are going to come back to. And again, I am someone who, and this will be a way to kind of work in my story a little bit. So I'm a professor of English, and I'm at Berkeley College, so I'm in the New Jersey, New York area, and I teach in person and online. And so I think a lot about what the virtual world means for social connection. And I think that one of the things that we jump past, we don't really want to think about too much when we're teaching online, is the framework. Why are we designing courses in a certain way? And I teach reading and writing. And at the core, reading and writing is all about society, and it's all about social learning. That writing is a way to interact with another person, whether it's in the moment or it's asynchronously, right? So when we write something, we want to think about our audience. We want to think about the interaction that happens. And reading too is all about entering someone else's voice. That's a little bit of my story and a little bit of how I'm thinking through this. And so now I want to give you the framework that I use. It's not going to get everything, because I think that if we try to capture everything with social learning, it's a fool's errand. We're going to miss stuff. But I want to give you these two models that I see as interconnected. And the first is by Albert Bandura. So he was a psychologist who became really, really big in the 1960s. And he became very known for what is called the Bobo doll experiment. And that's what you see an image of on the screen. So his was the idea. And in the 1960s, this was revolutionary. It seems very obvious to us, but what he did is he took a group of children and a group of adults, and he gave them a Bobo doll. Have you never seen this before? It's basically a giant, like, inflatable doll. It's about 5 feet tall. And usually it has a clown on it, right? This one did. We have video footage of it. He was a psychologist, so he filmed everything so we can go back to it later. And so he paired up a child and an adult, and he sent them into a room. And they had just a single Bobo doll. And the adult was under instructions. Their instructions were to abuse the doll. So hit it, throw it, and also verbally abuse it, right? Yell at it. And so Bandura was very interested in what happens when you have children observing this. For many of them, they didn't have context. Many of them had never seen this kind of doll before, and that matters. That is an important feature of this experiment. And so the children watched as the adult abused this doll. And then the adult left the room. And they kept the camera rolling. And the child was given no context. They were given no instructions. They just wanted to see how the child responded and what they did. The vast majority of children, after a few minutes of standing there looking at the doll, started to abuse it. They started to hit it, punch it. They actually had a toy gun in the room, and several of them tried to shoot the doll. And Albert Bandura was very interested in why this happened. And again, for some quick context, in the 1960s, the idea was that we learn to do things through social conditioning, right? So this is Pavlov's dog, that we do something, it gets a response, and that's how we learn behavior. But Bandura said, no, actually, so much about learned behavior is through that social context. It's through mirroring. It's through what a child does when they see an adult do something, and they assume that that is what I'm supposed to do. So it's about social connection. It is about acceptance. In many ways, that child, the vast majority of the time, makes an assumption about what an accepted behavior is because of how they saw an adult interact with this doll. And again, it seems sort of obvious to us, but in the 1960s, this was a big deal. This was very much taking what behaviorists had thought and what many psychologists thought and trying to turn it on its head. And this is still very influential today for thinking about social learning theory and why we do certain things. So that is one side of the coin. So that is about imitation. That is about mirroring. And this is something that I think we need to have in mind when we think about AI. And I think I'll make it a little bit clearer as we go along. But as we have AI in the mix in society really changing right now, I think we'll have to adapt that. All right, now that's one side of social learning theory. Now there's another one, which many of us might be very, very aware of. It actually might have come up in seminars and in this series before, but many times, and I put myself in this group, we don't think about it as a model of social learning, but it actually is at its very core about social connection. And this is Lev Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. And it's thrown out there a lot. So here is the basic idea that we want to design learning so that that individual student is challenged to an acceptable degree. So if you have a student who's struggling with something, right? You put them in a room and you want them to learn how to read or whatever the skill is. That as an educator, one of the things you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out how much you can challenge him so that you're giving him something achievable, something that that student can do, but not too much. And here you have an image I think really kind of captures this. So at the center, we have what I can learn on my own. So what a student can already do. And now we can adapt this for nowadays. So imagine your student going and not just reading, but they're going on YouTube, they're going online, they're doing web searches. So these are things they can do on their own. And so now, arguably, that circle is expanding. That students are learning to do more and more on their own. Maybe I'll throw that out as a question. That's actually a big part of debate. Are they learning to do more? Are they only learning to do less? Learning to do something different? I'm unsure right now. It's something that I'm constantly thinking about. But at the center, we have what I can learn on my own. And then beyond that, what I can learn with help. So this is the social part. So when we bring in knowledgeable others, someone else who's thinking about that, or someone else who knows something about learning. Right? This is what many of us do as educators, whether we are explicitly doing it or implicitly doing it. And this is based off of social learning. It's based off of what happens when you have another human guiding you along. I'm going to say human there. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to start to move away from that. Because again, what we want to do in this presentation, before we dive into building some stuff, is thinking about what AI, and even bigger than that, what modern technology means for how we understand that kind of social connection. Right? Again, this is a form of social learning theory, even though it's often not talked about that way. But it really is about human connection. Now, when Vygotsky created that zone of proximal development, he didn't have scaffolding. He didn't have that as a term yet. It wasn't created until later. But in 1976, so psychologists Wood, Bruner, and Ross used the zone of proximal development to create something that is so embedded in modern education, which is the idea of scaffolding. And again, it's so influential that right now, today, it sort of feels like common sense. But in the 1970s, it wasn't. People were still trying to figure out, or at least not on the level of theory, we're still trying to figure out what the zone of proximal development, ZPD, meant for the educator's role. And the idea, just for anyone who hasn't heard this or heard it in other terms, is that you're trying to figure out where a student already is and where you want them to go. So you're thinking about the present, you're thinking about the future, whether it's a near future or down the road future. And then you want to build steps. You want to build, this is the scaffolding part. You want to build the support structures that allow them to get there. So instead, as many of us are tempted to do, myself included, of having a student jump from step 1 to step 10, instead of doing that, you try to be as purposeful as you can for building out steps 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the more you can personalize it, the better in many ways. That for many of us, we tend to think about scaffolding as, or maybe not think about it, but approach scaffolding as a one-size-fits-all solution. But the more we can personalize it for the students, in many ways, the more successful that student can be because they have something that is built for them. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. I've been talking for about 20 minutes, and I'm going to, oh, there we go. All right, so I want to, instead of having a Q&A at the end, I try to do Q&As along the way. So I've given you a lot of information about zone of proximal development and Bandura and thinking about social learning. What are your thoughts so far? So feel free to pop them in the chat. If you have a question, if you have a comment, concern, or something else you want to bring in, maybe you disagree with me, that is cool. Pop it in the chat. So I'll give you like 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm doing this kind of a mini Q&A session rather than doing it at the end. So any sort of ideas popping up, anything you want to talk about now before we move on and think about technology and AI. And if you want to unmute yourself, you can unmute yourself. That's fine too. Or if everything is good, you can always write everything is good. Yeah. So someone wrote, feels like the duplication of the human brain and sometimes life itself. And that's the weirdness of it all. When we think about AI and think about how it is very much based off of imitating the human mind, that's when it gets very meta. So we have humans imitating humans, and then we have AI programs imitating humans as far as they're able to get from the internet. And so it's very strange. What we're moving into is a very strange world when we have humans and AI interacting with each other and then thinking about, we can think about what that means for society. All right, cool. Yeah, Newsom says the facilitator knows which child needs which level of scaffolding within a classroom. Yeah, so there's this kind of intuition that is built into the equation. One of the roles as educators is figuring out, we have this student, what sort of scaffolding can we build for them to push them as much as possible? And one of the ongoing questions is whether that is something that can be done by a non-human. And that's an open question. I don't have an answer for that yet. And I don't think anyone does. That some people are trying to figure out if that can be done, maybe even better than a human, or if you're giving up too much and handing that off to an AI or a robot or whatever it may be. Good. I love this question, this point so much. And of course, it's going to cut off your name. All right. So I'm going to scroll up to find this name because I love this so much. So this is from Higgum. So scaffolding and CBD are interesting analogies because they assume that someone knows the right direction of learning. It's already fixed in advance. Awesome. That is a question that I'm obviously going to talk about it now because I think it's so interesting. And it gets even more interesting when we think about technology. But that hits the nail on the head. One of the big questions for us as educators is what happens when we don't have an endpoint in mind? What does that kind of teaching look like? And this is very much thinking about possibilities. This is thinking about the future. This is thinking about things that we cannot predict. And so in many ways, this for me captures the modern goal in education, right? If the goal, one of our goals as educators is to get students to think about ambiguity, to get students to think about just how complex the world is. That's when this comes in. How do you scaffold learning when you don't know the endpoint? There are ways to do it, but we have to be very, very purposeful with it. And that's a question that I think we're going to find ourselves circling much, much more over the next few years. All right, and so I don't want to. I'm not going to get everyone. I love that the comments are coming in, so keep them coming up. They should be there. I should be able to look at them at the end anyway, and hopefully work them in along the way. Let's see. And then someone or AI technology, as it pops down, could be a personal assistant in different situations where humans may not be available. Yeah, and that's in many ways something about this technology that I think is really interesting. That what happens when we use AI bots, chatbots, maybe other forms of AI to actually step in and scaffold learning when no one is there? And this is a big question for online education. So the vast majority of my courses, at least right now at Berkeley College, are asynchronous by design, and they have to be. I'm actually required to make them as asynchronous as I possibly can. So they're designed so that students can pop into the course and do assignments, do challenges, whatever they are, at any time. And this is meant to make the learning as accessible as possible, so that if a student has a full-time job and 2 kids and all these different obligations, they can go on their computer, hopefully even on their phone, and do something at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, when I am not there to scaffold. I am not there to guide them. So if this is a student who really needs on-the-spot, in real-time help, this is one of the big benefits of AI. All right, and so on the last thing I'm going to focus on is someone mentioned that learning is a social and emotional enterprise. How can AI realistically build social and emotional competencies when it cannot read the context in which teachers carry them unless they feed the AI that contextual information? And this is the question I think I come back to probably more than any other. That when we think about scaffolding in a purely intellectual way, right? Say, hypothetically, we push the social aspect out of it, we push the emotional aspect out of it. It was impossible, but for the moment, as an exercise, if we did that, then it seems very doable to do with AI. But the problem is that learning is social. Learning is emotional. There is a kind of emotional connection. So in many ways, this is one of the things that I think pushes against AI hype. I think the idea, sorry, something like an AI tutor can be very, very helpful. But I do think, and this is what I'm gonna really walk through now, that a lot of it comes down to thinking about it as a complement and less of a substitute. I'm not so sure down the line it's going to be a great substitute for students, and maybe someone will prove me wrong. Maybe someone will say, oh no, it's a great substitute and we can now get rid of teachers. But I have a hard time seeing that. I think people will try, but I think that because of that social and emotional bonding that's necessary for a lot of learning, especially really challenging learning, that really dampens some of my enthusiasm. All right, so I didn't get through everything. Hopefully I got through a lot of the comments. And if I didn't get a chance to get to yours, you can bring it back in later. We'll have some other times for discussion. So I'm going to go share my screen again. It'll make me do all the stuff. All right, because now what we're going to do, Team sends me all these notifications. That's okay. All right, I'll click through it. So one of the things that I think is important, oh, it's going to make me click through everything. Give me 1 second. All right, so now we have this framework. We have this idea of social learning theory in the back of our minds. So, and I picked Bandura and Vygotsky because I think together they capture a lot of the essences about social learning, because we have the focus on imitation and mirroring, that humans have a tendency to mirror what they see, and that is an important part of our thirst for social connection. That's the Bandura idea. And then we have the Vygotsky idea, which is that human connection and scaffolding, so something that's built in a little bit later, can get us to learn at an appropriate pace, but the human connection needs to be there. And so neither of them, I don't think, really had technology on their mind, or at least not how we see technology, right? Neither Bandura or Vygotsky really thought a lot about what happens when we have this modern technology, when we have cell phones and AI, right? They didn't have this question because they didn't have the technology. So how could they think about it? So I want to expand our framework, and I want to expand it for the moment beyond AI. I actually don't want us to land on AI yet. I want us to think bigger. I want us to think bigger picture, because I think that is going to allow us to think about AI and role-playing chatbots in a specific way. So now I want to play with that framework and think specifically about how technology fits into this story. And at the heart of my idea here, and many people predicted this in the chat, which is awesome. Kind of see where my mind is going with this. But at the heart of this question is, what is happening to society? What happens when we have this sort of technology? So I'm going to start with a movie. All right. So I hope that this will become clear why I do this. But I want to start with WALL-E. Many of us may have seen this before, and even if you haven't, I'll basically get you caught up. So this is a world in which, so the first, and this is from 2008, the first 40 minutes or so of the film, it's really based off of a robot. So this is WALL-E here. And again, many of us may know this already, and his interactions with Eve. And then about halfway through the movie, they start interacting with humans. So I want to show you how they represent humanity.
Do you know what's really fun?
Oh, of course, there will be a commercial, which I will skip in 2 seconds.
Hey, where Howard?
All right, here we go. And so as this goes, I wanted you to think about how it represents modern technology.
Hit a few virtual balls into space.
Nah, we did that yesterday. I don't want to do that.
Well, then what do you want to do?
I don't know. Something.
Wow.
Let the place scream.
It does sound.
Look, I'm tired of this.
If you can't pull the straw, you have to do something good.
What? Over here.
Tunnel. I'm in the tunnel. I can't hear you.
By and large, everything you need to be happy. Your day is very important to us.
Hey, very much. Here, take a cup. Hey, take the cup.
Please remain stationary. A service spot will be here to assist you momentarily.
George. Oh.
Please remain stationary. A service spot will be here to assist you momentarily.
What's going on? John. No. John. Hi, Wally.
A is for Axiom, your home sweet home. B is for by and large, your very best friend.
Time for lunch. In the car. Feels beautiful. Attention, Axiom shoppers. Call blue. It's the new red.
Ooh.
Mary? Sure.
All right, and that is the end of the clip. It was about 3 minutes long. So I'm going to pop out of my little sharing. All right, so in the chat, this I'm not going to do as a big Q&A thing. I'll give you about a minute. Why did I show it? Why do you think I showed this clip? What are they thinking about in terms of modern technology? And again, we haven't quite landed on AI yet, although in some ways we have. But why did I show it? And what are they thinking about with modern technology? Good. So this question about dependency. Awesome. This is awesome. Yeah, and feel free to pop in as many ideas as you want. Anything you noticed. Yeah, and this focus on humans becoming more lethargic. One of the big arguments here is, will modern technology allow for human connection, or will it get in the way of it? All right. Oh, and it lagged. I'm sorry. Hopefully the next video won't lag as much. All right, cool. And this idea that humans becoming more powerful. And was the lag really bad with the video? Because I can also jump the next one if I need to. Good. And discussion about less human connection. Good. So we have the whatever is there of human connection happening through screens. So this is very much mediated interactions. That there's very, very little direct interaction between humans and much more going through screens, going through technology. There's more frustration. Yeah, so we have this representation of modern technology as possibly allowing for human connection, but just as likely getting in the way of it. And for me, in many ways, this is a movie of the moment. This is something that I think we really need to think about when we consider humans and AI and how they connect with each other. And let's see. Okay, and someone says humans are now limited in thinking and creativity. So here's the dynamic, and this is what could get us to think more specifically about AI. Is there are ways to use, if we have a certain approach, AI to really lean into our creativity, to think about things, and this came up in the chat earlier, think about things from a different angle, think about concepts from a different angle, solutions from a different angle. But that requires a certain mindset. And because it can move us in the other direction, it can start to limit us. And this is kind of a paradox that many of us may have run into when we use AI. If you go and you use a chatbot, could be ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever it is. Sometimes it expands our horizons. Sometimes it really limits them. That I often find in a chat that, oh, even though I'm asking you to be innovative, even though I'm asking the chatbot to look at things differently, sometimes you just take a step back and say, I need to push this a little bit further. It's just not doing the work, right? It's not actually getting me to that innovative, creative space. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. But being aware as educators and as students of how to do that takes a little bit of adjustment. And then let's see, they rely more on AI than interacting with humans. And then we should use AI as a tool, not as a replacement. Yeah, so that comes back to this idea about the mindset, right? We need a mindset that allows us to think about it that way. All right, so I'm about 43 minutes in. So I do want to start to shift a little bit to think about AI because we have about 45 minutes left together. And all of this is about giving you a kind of framework for thinking about chatbots, thinking about AI, and thinking about modern society. So this is where I'll start to kind of focus down a little bit more. What I'm going to do, because several people said that there was a lag, I am going to, oh, you know what? Give me 1 second. The last video clip, I might do that through YouTube. It might be YouTube directly. It might be a little bit better. So if it's not done through my PowerPoint, but I'm going to share my screen for a minute. All right, so Let's see. Oh, it's gonna make me do it again. That's good. All right, so we have that framework, and again, so much of this is about modern technology and thinking about cell phones. So there's also this argument, and I'm going to throw it as an argument. It's not one I automatically completely agree with. So this is done by Jonathan Haidt, and he wrote a book probably a year or two ago called The Anxious Generation. He was thinking about exactly what that movie is representing. That what happens if we have technology that, even though it seems like it's going to mediate human connection, it's going to allow for human connection, what happens when it gets in the way? And for him, this is an epidemic of mental illness, right? That's what comes out of this. We have this, what he's calling the rewiring of childhood, that so much of it is done through a screen, whether it is through our cell phone, our tablet, computer, whatever it is. And so he's very worried about the future of human connection. He sees an anxiety epidemic coming out of that. Now, again, that's something to think about, something to have in the back of our minds as we think about using some of this technology in the classroom. And again, we don't have to agree with it. I think it is an important idea. It's a provocative idea. And I go back and forth about whether what he focuses on, the technology, actually is an adequate explanation of the anxiety. And so that's, again, a question, not an answer. And so now I think we're prepared. Now I think we're really ready to think about AI and adding it to the conversation. And here's the big idea. Here's the big question that drives my thought process. And this is why I went to Bandura. This is why, and it's his Bobo dolls, that explanation, that example. It's why I went to him. It's why I went to Vygotsky. It's why I went to Wally. And it's also why I went to Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation argument, because I find myself circling around this question, that when we have chatbots, when we have ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, everything else, what does that mean for the social? This whole series is about social learning. What happens when, yes, the learning is changing too, but what happens when the social is changing? And that's shifting. When we're going into a world, and our students and our children, I have a 1-year-old and I have a 4-year-old, and every core of my being believes that they're going to grow up into this world where it's not just that, you know, humans and machines are separate, but that they're intertwined and that they are interacting with each other. They're interacting with each other every day through their devices. And when my children grow up and go into the workforce, that they are likely going to go into a workforce when they will be working side by side machines and AI programs and everything else. And so in many ways, the social fabric that many of us are thinking about is fundamentally changing. And that's something I really, really want to think about. And I'm going to do this through YouTube directly. Hopefully that makes the lag a little bit better. Fingers crossed on that front. So give me 1 second. I will look it up. All right, so, and this is where we get to really thinking about AI.
Gosh, I'm out of breath. We made it. I don't know how to woo very good. That's fair. All right, let's go.
Let me show you how to game, bro, okay? Oh, come on, come on. Oh, my God.
Are you serious? Come on, man. I hate this game.
Take notes, baby. Oh, man, you guys suck, bro. You look like back.
Let's go. Let's go.
Dude, what? How did you do that?
I know the effects are crazy. Stank, I could eat one of these every day. Oh. Sorry, I got you messy.
It's really nice up here. How'd you find this?
I don't know. I just kind of like to come up here to be by myself. I've never brought anybody else. I mean, besides her.
He goes everywhere with you, right?
Mhm.
Guess I must be doing something right then.
I guess so. We'll see.
All right, so this is an actual product. This is something that's been created that's going out into the world, and I give it as a very extreme example in some ways, but also really an example that really captures what is happening right now, that our students are less and less seeing AI as something that is contained on a website. That some of them, yes, they are going to ChatGPT and they're interacting with it, but the vast majority, a lot of the time now, that technology is being worked into their cell phones, being worked into devices, being worked into wearables. So they're actually bringing these pendants. Or now I actually have a friend who was teaching high school history and had a student who was using AI glasses and was simply there and scanning a worksheet, getting help, getting assistance, and just completing it on their own. And this is really what's happening. And it's something that I think is starting to fundamentally reshape society. And again, that's huge for us. For thinking about social learning, anything that reshapes society is really, really important because it might change our approach. It might change how we're thinking about it. And so one of the things that I come to constantly.
Spring training to world.
As it goes into the next video, that is all right. And one of the ideas I come back to again and again is this. What happens as AI becomes integrated in society? What does that mean for how we teach? What does it mean for how we approach something like a chatbot? And that's where I'm going to land because, we have now all this context. We have about 40 minutes left or so together. We have all this context. And so what does it mean for how we talk about role-playing chatbots? And I hope that as we talk about this, and as I give you a chance to start to build out some of the ideas for your own, that this scaffolding, this framework actually helps. Because what we want to do is we want to create, if we wanted to have role-playing chatbots in our classroom, we want to create ones that actually scaffold students for human interaction. And that's a very kind of weird reframing. And there's a lot that goes into informing that, and so much of it is about where students are right now in terms of anxiety, social connection. Many of my students sort of struggle with that, even at the college level. Using role-playing chatbots, not as, and this came up in the chat too, not as a replacement, because that gets us to that kind of Wall-E universe, but as a stepping stone to human interaction, actually bringing students out and preparing them for human interaction. And I'm going to give you an example. I'll go here. Oh, I think it's going to require me to click through quickly. That's all right. Take a second. All right, so this is something I give my students. And I've done this in a literature class, that instead of doing a paper, I give them a set of exercises. And one of them is this. So this is a debate chatbot that I use to teach children's literature. So hopefully they already have the reading, they already have some context for it. And so a student, and I'll click into this to see, just to show you what it looks like. Just take a second. All right, so the student goes into this chatbot that I've created. This is my own personal thing. And it is meant to help them out. So this is a role-playing chatbot. This is meant to, so the AI here at ChatGPT is directed to act in a certain way, act as a human-ish thing in a specific role. And so a student goes in, they can actually just click hi, or they can write it in, either is fine, and it will walk them through, right? So do you have any questions before we dive in? So I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna pretend to be the student. I'm gonna say no, and it will go along the way. So it's standing in and it's setting things up. So I'm gonna say, we'll do Riding Hood, right? So Little Red Riding Hood. And there's a lot that's happening in the background here, right? So it lets them know what the point of the exercise is. mentions me by name, lets know what they're doing. All right. So my argument is that the girl isn't smart. All right, so I'm going to do it, just some argument, some idea. Student might do that. All right, so, and it's going to ask me to work through that idea. All right, she talks to the wolf. And you can see how this works. So the AI is designed to take that other perspective. And this is where the role playing comes in. So it says, but consider this. Was it really foolish of her to talk to the wolf, or was she simply being polite? All right, so that's sort of interesting, a different way of approaching it. All right, so I'm going to say, I don't think so. She should have listened. Have listened to her mom. So what I'm really doing here is I'm pretending to be a student. I'm role-playing, and I'm using my role-playing chatbot. And so it's here having this conversation, right? And then it says, isn't it possible she's just inexperienced rather than intelligent? Sure, but she should have been obedient. So, and hopefully a student, if they're given the chatbot, is doing a little bit more than that. Right? They're going and giving other evidence and actually like digging into having a conversation with this chatbot. Right, so you can kind of see how this goes. If no one warns her, friendly stranger could be dangerous. Is it reasonable? All right, I'm going to say, I'm going to let it win. All right, I'm going to let it win the chat. I'm going to let it win the debate. All right. All right, so now it's Tom's in there, and it says, do you want to keep going? Where do you want to stop? I want to say stop. And it's going to give me feedback. It is going to give me an evaluation. So how I did with defending my argument, how I did with using evidence, how I did with communicating my idea. So 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5, overall feedback. And so again, this is something where I'm in the background. I told the AI exactly what to do. And this is a role-playing exercise that I give to my students, and they actually send the entire chat. Now, if I stopped there, if I just said, engage with this chatbot, and this is your grade, right? Say I just decide, the 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5. All right, cool. That's going to equate to some grade. I'll just take the average, go from there. If I do that, here's the problem. I'm not using the AI to scaffold for human connection. I'm just replacing. I'm getting us to that Wall-E universe a little bit more piece by piece. So here, as with a lot of these exercises, the real focus is on following up. So I give my students a reflection exercise. So they actually do this through Zoom. They can do this through Zoom in real time. They can do it through video, although at some point I want to talk to them synchronously. But I use this as a launch point, as a starting point for human connection. That's where they connect with me, connect with other students. So this is an exercise where I can ask them to reflect on, was the grading accurate, for example? Do you think you should have gotten a 3 out of 5 for using evidence, or a 4 out of 5 for communication? So the trick here is, if you use a role-playing chatbot, one, you can use it as an entry point for the conversation. So if instead of just saying reflect on it in a very general, abstract way, saying students reflect on something specific. So you can do that. You can do any sort of follow-up activity. And again, the trick here is to scaffold it, to purposely think about how this exercise can be used for human interaction. And I'm going to give you a very quick glimpse of this, because then I do want to start to not talk, because it's about 11 on my side. So we have about half an hour left. So I want to show you what's going on in the background, because this was created through ChatGPT. And you can see it has a name, the description, and then the big thing here is the instructions. And so I have information about, and I can pop this in the chat if you want. I can share this with you. I'm more than happy to give it to you. You can take it, you can adapt it, whatever you want. Information about the style, the argumentation style, right? So very, very specific there. And then the instructions. And if you do decide to take this exercise and to build a role-playing chatbot, which for me is one of the big benefits of this technology, those steps are key. So I tell it, step 1, do this. Then move to step 2. Step 2, do this. All right, then proceed to step 3. All right, and you kind of see how this works. It walks it through exactly what to do. And then at some point, it branches off. So step 4, engage me in direct debate, push against my assumptions using direct evidence from the story. Use quotes. Keep your answers and replies short and evidence-based. After you've written 5 replies, get back to me, move on to step 5. And then, oh, here we go. Step 5, say this. If I say I want to keep going, go to step 6. If I say I want to stop, go to step 7. So that's when you start to see the branching off. That's when you start to see some students might take this path, some students might take the other path. And that's actually sort of by design because I want to personalize it for them as much as I can. Some students might want to continue, and I've noticed this in transcripts they sent me, continue to play with the chatbot, talk to the chatbot, and others are just, they want to move on. They want the evaluation part. All right, so that is the exercise that I give them. And again, with the follow-up, I think the trick is to put it in the context of social learning theory. Right? How can I use this as a way to bring human connection? I have a very quick 10-minute activity. And so, Renima, whenever you have a chance, I do want to create those groups, those breakout rooms, because I want to think about how you can do this. And I'm going to do this as a quick 10-minute activity. Then we'll come back, we'll talk. So this is the workshop part of today, because we have that framework, which again, I think we really want to keep in the back of our minds, that framework of social learning theory. And then we have a use case. We have role-playing chatbots and using them as a way to actually privilege human connection. And so what I'm going to do is in the chat right now, I'm going to pop in a Google Doc. I had to choose doing this as a file. I can do it that works better. So, and Redeem, I'll give you kind of the okay to do this. In a minute, I'm going to send you into breakout rooms. Ideally maybe 4 people. And I want you to look at this. So here's the basic idea. Imagine you're doing this. Imagine you have a class and you want to use a role-playing chatbot. How would you do it? Just brainstorm. How would you, and I get the thumbs up from Redina, so awesome. All right, so what kind of chatbot would you create, do you think? And how do you think it would help with social learning, or maybe hurt social learning? Maybe you just think, I don't know how to do that sort of scaffolding. Let me know. So yeah, Redima, whenever you are ready, feel free to send people in. So again, 10 minutes. So come back about 11:15 my time. And that gives us 10 minutes to debrief, talk about what happened, and then end our session for today. So in your group, what sort of role-playing chatbots did you come up with? So my group, we came up with 4 or so of them. So if you were in a class and you wanted to bring a chatbot into it and a role-playing chatbot into it, what could you see yourself creating, right? And what sort of role-playing chatbot could help you scaffold for human connection? And again, you can type it in the chat and I'll just put that question in there right now. Or you can unmute yourself and share what your team talked about. And if they come up, you can just pop them in there. So my team created about 4 of them. So we thought about our students and how we could use AI to really help them out. So we developed a chatbot that was made specifically for reflection, right? And actually we see, so Uzma mentioned, oh yeah, and that you mentioned that, yeah. So so a chatbot that helps us own our own reflections, so actually guides students through the reflection process. And so there are a lot of that when it comes to using it, not as a replacement for human connection, but a scaffolding for human connection, is then, as an educator, as a teacher, you want to put that in context. You want to then allow for reflections between humans, or you want to allow, whether it's through, done virtually or done in person, you want to allow for that reflection to actually happen. And the other one we mentioned, chatbot that helps students and researchers generate accurate references. All right, cool. So I love that my team is jumping in. That's awesome. So one of the big obstacles with using AI in the classroom is hallucinations. And so for anyone who doesn't know that term or talks about it a different way, uses a different set of words, basically this is when a chatbot makes something up. It makes an error. It creates something that doesn't exist. I actually had a friend a few months ago who was teaching. They were teaching research writing, and a student used a chatbot, and it created something that it said the professor wrote. So that the professor was cited in the paper for something she did not create because it just straight up made something up. And so it's one of the big obstacles with using AI in the classroom. So having a chatbot made for that would be awesome. All right, and another one that is really important, which someone just put in the chat, is a friendly chatbot. So that a student can use a chatbot to practice social learning, can practice creating relationships. And then again, as with all of these, the trick is to have those follow-ups, put it in context, treat it as a scaffold and not as a replacement. That's really the big theme as we start to wrap things up for this session, trying to see how we can use AI to scaffold human connection if we need to. And one of the big ideas here, and again, I do want to end with something big for you, is what does it mean for us? What does that mean for the classroom? What does that mean as we move forward and we think about society as increasingly not just human, but human and machine, or human and AI? How does that change the learning, the strategies we use in our classroom? Because I think we should. One kind of big idea I'll end you with is it's now 2025. And moving forward, I think there's every evidence that our students and our children are going to grow up in this world where AI is increasingly embedded in everyday life and everyday work life. And one of the things we can really do for them is to walk them through this, give them whatever support we can in terms of how students can prepare for that world. And I think that a lot of this has to do with being open. A lot of this has to do with really connecting with our students, that all of this conversation about modern technology, cell phones, ChatGPT, how we are engaging with the world, all this comes back to human connection. And as educators, as teachers, that's it. That's what we do. The more I think about it, the more I think that our role as educators is going to be based off of actually showing as much as we can, as consistently as we can, what it means to be human, what it means to be vulnerable, what it means to connect. And one of the reasons that I give you this framework, I gave you Bandura, I gave you Vygotsky, I gave you Wally, and everything else, is that I think we have to be very purposeful with it. That it would be awesome for me to just come in and say, here's how to build chatbots, here's how to build role-playing chatbots, and that might be useful. But I think we need to think bigger. I think that the first step, the first question is, should we be doing that? And this question, my answer was yes, and here are ways to do it. You might differ. You might, as you reflect on it more, think about it more, you might say, well, I'm not sure I'm getting to the scaffolding part. It feels like a replacement. And that helps guide you in your decision. And it's all based off of context. One of the reasons I don't go into sessions and I say, here's what I want you to do and how to do it, is because it all depends on context. It all depends on who you're teaching. It depends on what you're teaching. It depends on what you want them to get out of it, what you want your students to get out of it. And all I'm doing, and this is my wrap up, and I'll pop in a second, very quick link in the chat. But all I'm trying to do today is give you a basic framework that allows you to start making those decisions. Right? Start to think about whether a role-playing chatbot, and again, I did a debate bot, and really the essence here is creating a chatbot. And you can do this with all of them. You can do this with ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, that walks students through a process. And you can start to see how not just their reading and writing ability, although that's part of it, but also how they're connecting, whether they're connecting, and then figuring out how from there you can start to scaffold things. So I just popped in the chat my contact information. So this is the QR code I started with today. If you want to reach out to me, go for it. I have my email in there. I have some of my social media in there. I actually might have my phone number on there. If you want like my WhatsApp or anything like that, reach out to me, and I have that as well, especially for international communication. So let me know. Please feel free to take this as a jumping off point for human connection. So if you want to reach out to me, you want to talk to me, anything like that, feel free to do so. And thank you so much for coming today and listening to me. And I know that it was a lot of different things cobbled together, but at the same time, I think that's where we are. I think that that's where we are in terms of trying to make sense of this technology, figuring out how it connects to everything else. And so again, it's an open invitation. Feel free to reach out to me. And thank you for coming and listening to me. And I am done.